A stray guards a truck hiding a secret. Mia follows, unraveling a chilling mystery. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe our channel Paws. If this story touches your heart, please like the video and share it with others. The sun hung low over the Indiana horizon, painting the sky in streaks of gold and amber as Mia Harper steered her battered Jeep down a gravel road just outside Cloverdale. The air was thick with the scent of wild clover and dust, stirred up by the tires crunching over loose stones. At 32, Mia had spent nearly a decade with the Putnam County Animal Rescue, her hands calloused from years of coaxing scared dogs from ditches and untangling cats from barbed wire. Her dark braids swung against her back as she leaned forward, squinting through the windshield at the faded sign ahead. Cloverdale Ironworks, Esther, 1962. The factory had been shuttered for years, its smokestacks now skeletal against the sky. But the lot around it was a graveyard of rusted machinery and forgotten dreams. Mia's radio crackled, and Jake's voice cut through the static. "You sure about this tip, Mia? Sounds like another wild goose chase." Jake, her partner of 3 years, was already parked at the edge of the lot, his pickup a speck in the distance. He was a burly guy with a soft spot for strays, but a skepticism. That balanced Mia's instincts. "Anonymous or not, we check it," Mia replied, her voice steady but tinged with the weariness of too many calls that ended in heartbreak. The tip had come in late last night, a shaky voice on the shelters. Voicemail, claiming a dog was guarding something in the old ironworks lot. "Starving, won't leave," the caller had said before the line went dead. Mia's gut churned at the word guarding. Dogs didn't just guard for no reason. She pulled up beside Jake's truck, cutting the engine. The silence of the lot was heavy, broken only by the faint hum of cicadas and the creak of a loose chain-link fence swaying in the breeze. Jake stepped out, his boots scuffing the dirt, a thermos of coffee in one hand. His flannel shirt was rolled up to the elbows, and his baseball cap shaded eyes that scanned the lot with practiced caution. "Place gives me the creeps," he muttered, nodding toward the tangle of knee-high weeds and rusted trailers scattered across the property. Like something out of a ghost story, Mia managed a half-smile, grabbing her backpack from the passenger seat. It was stuffed with the usual: dog treats, a collapsible water bowl, a first aid kit, and a leash she hoped she'd get to use. "Good thing we're not here for ghosts," she said, slinging the bag over her shoulder. Her hazel eyes swept the lot, searching for movement. The ironworks had been a hub once, employing half the town, but now it was a relic, its buildings sagging under the weight of time and neglect. The trailers, abandoned by workers or squatters, were streaked with moss, their windows either boarded up or shattered. She took a step forward, her boots sinking slightly into the soft earth. The air felt too still, like the lot was holding its breath. Mia had seen plenty of grim scenes in her years with the rescue. Puppies left in cardboard boxes, dogs tied to trees with no food or water. But something about this place prickled the back of her neck. Maybe it was the isolation, or maybe it was the way the shadows seemed to cling to the edges of everything. "Over there," Jake said suddenly, pointing toward a clearing about 50 yards away. Mia followed his gaze, and her breath caught. There, half hidden by a cluster of thistles, was a pickup truck, its paint faded to a dull gray, its hood dented and streaked with rust. Vines had begun their slow climb up the flat tires, as if the earth itself was trying to claim it. But what stopped Mia cold wasn't the truck. It was the dog. He sat like a sentinel in front of the driver's door, his wiry frame rigid, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He was small, maybe 20 pounds, with a coat the color of dried wheat and ears too big for his head. His ribs pressed against his sides, and his fur was matted with burrs, but there was a quiet dignity in his posture, a steadfastness that made Mia's heart ache. He wasn't barking, wasn't pacing, wasn't even glancing at them. He was waiting. "Jake," Mia said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "Look at him." Jake set his thermos on the hood of his truck, his brow furrowing. "Yeah, I see him. Starving, like the caller said. But what's he doing? Not even twitching." Mia took a cautious step closer, her hand dipping into her bag for a handful of treats. "He's guarding something," she said, her voice steady, but her pulse quickening. She'd seen dogs protect food bowls or toys, but this was different. The dog's gaze was too focused, too deliberate, like he was standing watch over something or someone. The weeds crunched under her boots as she moved closer, Jake trailing a few steps behind. The dog's ears flicked at the sound, but he didn't. "Turn!" Mia stopped about 15 feet away, crouching low to make herself less threatening. "Hey, buddy," she said, her voice soft and warm, the tone she'd perfected over years of coaxing terrified animals. "You hungry? We've got some good stuff for you." She tossed a treat gently, letting it land a few feet in front of him. The dog's nose twitched, but his body didn't move. His eyes, dark and soulful, flicked toward her for the briefest moment before returning to their vigil. Mia's stomach twisted. This wasn't about food. This was about loyalty. "Jake, something's not right," she said, glancing back at him. Her voice was low, urgent. "He's not guarding the truck, he's guarding what's in it." Jake's eyes narrowed and he stepped up beside her, his hand resting on the radio clipped to his belt. "You think there's something inside? Like, what?" "I don't know," Mia admitted, her gaze shifting to the truck's grimy windows. The glass was too filthy to see through from this distance, but the way the dog sat, so resolute, so unwavering, told her everything she needed to know. "But we're about to find out." Mia's heart thudded as she inched closer to the rusted pickup truck, the dry weeds whispering against her jeans. The dog, still unnamed, still a mystery, remained statue-like, his wiry frame taut with purpose. His oatmeal-colored coat caught the fading sunlight, giving him an almost ethereal glow, but it was his eyes that held Mia captive. They were deep, soulful and unwavering, locked on some invisible point beyond her and Jake. She'd seen plenty of strays in her time, skittish, aggressive or broken, but this one was different. He wasn't just surviving, he was standing. "Guard easy, buddy," Mia murmured, keeping her voice low and soothing. She stopped about 10 feet from the truck, close enough to see the dog's ribs pressing against his sides, the burrs tangled in his fur, and the faint tremor in his legs from hunger or exhaustion. Yet he didn't budge. His oversized ears twitched. At her words, but his body stayed rooted, a small defiant sentinel in front of the driver's door. Jake hung back, his hands stuffed in his pockets, his eyes darting between the dog and the truck. "He's not even sniffing the treats," he said, his voice tinged with unease. "What kind of dog ignores food like that?" "The kind that's got something more important," Mia replied, her gaze shifting to the truck. The vehicle was a relic, its gray paint chipped and peeling, its hood dented like it had taken a beating from time itself. Vines snaked up the flat tires, and a thick layer of grime coated the windows, making it impossible to see inside from where they stood. But Mia's gut, honed by years of rescue calls, screamed that whatever the dog was guarding was inside that cab. She took another cautious step, her boots sinking into the soft earth. The dog's head turned slightly, his eyes meeting hers for the first time. They weren't fearful or aggressive, just steady, assessing, as if he was deciding whether she was worthy of his trust. Mia's breath caught. There was a weight to that gaze, a story she couldn't yet read but felt in her bones. "Hey, little guy," she said, kneeling slowly to lower her profile. She reached into her backpack and pulled out a collapsible water bowl, filling it from her canteen. The sound of the water splashing seemed to echo in the still air. She slid the bowl forward, stopping just out of the dog's reach. "You've been out here a while, haven't you? Let's start with this." The dog's nose twitched, and for a moment Mia thought he might move, but his paws stayed planted, his body angled protectively in front of the driver's door. Jake shifted behind, his boots scuffing the dirt. "Mia, this is weird. He's not acting like a stray. He's, I don't know, deliberate." "Yeah," Mia agreed, her voice barely above a whisper. She stood slowly, keeping her movements smooth to avoid startling the dog. Her eyes traced the truck's outline, lingering on the driver's side window. The glass was smeared with dirt, but there was a faint shadow inside, something that didn't look like a seat or a pile of junk. Her pulse quickened. "Jake, I need to get closer to that window." Jake's brow furrowed, but he nodded, stepping up beside her. "It's all right, but if that dog decides we're trouble, I'm not explaining the bite marks to the boss." His attempt at humor fell flat, his eyes betraying the same unease Mia felt. They moved together, slow and deliberate, circling slightly, to approach the truck from an angle that wouldn't crowd the dog. As they neared, the dog's ears flicked, and he shifted his weight, his body tensing. Mia froze, raising her hands, palms out. "We're not here to hurt you," she said softly. "We just want to help. Whatever you're protecting, we'll take care of it, promise." The dog tilted his head, his eyes searching hers. For a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. The cicadas, the rustling weeds, even Jake's quiet footsteps faded into the background. Then, as if making a decision, the dog let out a soft, almost inaudible whine and took a single step to the side, not away from the door, but enough to give Mia a clear path. Mia's heart swelled. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. She glanced at Jake, who gave her a tight nod, his hand hovering near the radio on his belt. She edged forward, her eyes locked on the driver's window. The closer she got, the clearer the shadow inside became. It wasn't a bag or a coat. It was a shape, a small curled-up shape. "Jake," she said, her voice sharp but low, "there's someone in there." Jake was at her side in an instant, his skepticism replaced by urgency. "You sure?" He leaned in, squinting through the grime. "Holy, yeah, I see it. Looks like a kid." Mia's stomach lurched. She turned back to the dog, who had resumed, his post by the door, his eyes now flicking between her and the truck. "You've been keeping them safe, haven't you?" she said, more to herself than to him. The dog's tail gave the faintest twitch, and Mia felt a surge of admiration for this scrappy, starving creature who had chosen duty over survival, so she reached for the door handle, her fingers brushing the rusted metal. The dog didn't growl, didn't move, but his whine grew louder, a plea wrapped in courage. Mia's resolve hardened. Whatever was inside that truck, whoever this dog had been guarding, she was going to make sure they got out alive. Mia's fingers curled around the truck's door handle, the metal cold and gritty under her touch. Her pulse hammered in her ears, drowning out the distant hum of cicadas. The dog, still nameless, still a steadfast guardian, watched her every move, his soulful eyes glinting with a mix of trust and urgency. His faint whine lingered in the air, a quiet plea that seemed to say, "Hurry." Mia glanced at Jake, who stood a few feet back, his hand on the radio, his jaw tight. The shadow inside the truck, small and curled, was unmistakable now. A child alone in a place where no one should be. "Ready?" Mia asked, her voice low but steady. Jake nodded, his eyes flicking to the dog who hadn't budged from his post by the door. Mia took a deep breath, bracing herself for what she might find. The door creaked as she pulled, the hinges groaning from years of rust and neglect. A wave of stale air hit her, sweat, mildew, and something faintly sweet, like overripe fruit. The smell twisted her stomach, but she leaned in, peering into the dim cab. There on the back seat was a girl, no older than 7, curled into a tight ball. Her dark hair was matted, clinging to her pale, gaunt face. She clutched a tattered, stuffed bear, its fur worn to patches, and her clothes, a faded hoodie and jeans, hung loosely on her small frame. She didn't stir, didn't even flinch at the sound of the door. Her chest rose and fell, shallow but steady, the only sign she was alive. "Jake, it's a kid," Mia said, her voice cracking. She climbed into the cab, her knees sinking into the cracked vinyl seat. "She's breathing, but she looks bad." Her hands hovered over the girl, unsure where to start. Dehydration, malnourishment. Mia had seen the signs before, but never in a child left like this, abandoned in a rotting truck. Jake was already on the radio, his voice clipped. "Dispatch, we need an ambulance at the old ironworks lot, Cloverdale. Child unconscious, possible dehydration, hurry." He stepped closer, peering over Mia's shoulder. "How long you think she's been here?" "Days, maybe," Mia said, her throat tight. She reached for her backpack, pulling out a bottle of water and a clean cloth. She dampened the cloth and gently pressed it to the girl's forehead, hoping to rouse her. "Come on, sweetheart," she whispered. "You're safe now." The dog whined again, louder this time, and Mia glanced back. He had edged closer, his nose twitching as he sniffed the open door. His eyes were locked on the girl, and for the first time his tail gave a slow, tentative wag. Mia's heart clenched. You stayed with her, didn't you? She said softly. Kept her safe. Jake crouched beside the dog, his voice gentle. Hey buddy, you did good. Let us take it from here. He reached out, offering his hand for the dog to sniff. The dog hesitated, then leaned forward, his cold nose brushing Jake's fingers. It was a small gesture, but it felt like a bridge, a moment of trust earned in the midst of chaos. Mia turned back to the girl, checking her pulse, weak but steady. She looked so fragile, like a bird fallen from its nest, yet there was a stubborn strength in the way she clung to that bear. Mia's mind raced with questions. Who left her here? How did the dog find her? And why hadn't anyone come looking? The anonymous tip gnawed at her. Someone knew about this, but they hadn't shown their face. The distant wail of sirens broke her thoughts. Mia glanced out the window, seeing red and blue lights flashing through the weeds. They're almost here, she said, more to herself than to the girl. She kept the cloth pressed to the girl's forehead, murmuring soft reassurances. You're gonna be okay, we've got you. The dog let out a low, almost relieved huff and sat back on his haunches, his eyes never leaving the girl. Mia watched, him, marveling at his loyalty. He was starving, exhausted, yet he'd chosen to stay, to guard this child against the world. She'd seen dogs do incredible things, sniff out danger, comfort the grieving. But this was something else. This was devotion, pure and unbreakable. Jake stood as the ambulance pulled into the lot, its tires crunching over gravel. I'll flag them down, he said, jogging toward the clearing. Mia stayed put, her hand resting lightly on the girl's arm. The dog shifted closer, his nose nudging the edge of the seat, as if checking that the girl was still there. Mia reached out with her free hand, letting her fingers graze his matted fur. You're a hero, you know that? She said quietly. His ears flicked, and he leaned into her touch, just for a moment. The paramedics arrived, their boots heavy, on the ground as they approached with a stretcher and a medical bag. Mia stepped back, giving them space to work. They moved quickly, checking the girl's vitals, slipping an oxygen mask over her face. She's stable but critical, one of them said, his voice calm but urgent. We need to get her to the hospital now. Mia nodded, her eyes stinging as she watched them lift the girl onto the stretcher. The dog stood, his whine turning into a soft bark, his body tensing as if he might follow. Mia knelt beside him, her hand gentle on his scruff. It's okay, buddy, they're helping her. You did your job. But the dog's eyes were fixed on the stretcher, his body trembling with the need to stay close. Mia's chest ached. She knew that look, the fierce, unyielding bond of a dog who'd found someone to protect. She couldn't let him be separated from the girl, not after everything he'd done. Jake, she called, her voice firm. He turned, already halfway to the ambulance. We're bringing the dog. He's not staying, Mia's words hung in the air, resolute despite the chaos unfolding around her. We're bringing the dog. He's not staying here. The dog, still without a name, but already a hero in Mia's eyes, stood rigid, his wiry frame trembling as the paramedics carried the girl's stretcher toward the ambulance. His soulful eyes tracked every movement, and a low, anxious whine escaped his throat. Mia's heart twisted. She'd seen dogs pine for their people before, but this was different. This was a bond forged in survival, a promise kept against all odds. Jake turned, his brow creased with concern but no argument in his expression. You sure? He's half-starved, Mia. Might be a handful. His voice was practical, but his eyes softened as they flicked to the dog, who had taken a tentative step toward the ambulance, his matted tail twitching. I'm sure, Mia said, her tone leaving no room for debate. She knelt beside the dog, her hand resting gently on his bony shoulder. You're coming with us, buddy. She needs you. The dog's ears flicked at her voice, and he leaned into her touch, his whine softening, but his gaze still locked on the stretcher. Mia felt a surge of respect for this scrappy creature who had guarded a child through who knows how many nights in that rotting truck. The paramedics were already loading the girl into the ambulance, their movements swift and practiced. One of them, a woman with a clipboard, glanced back at Mia. We're taking her to Putnam General. You can follow, but we need to move fast. Mia nodded, standing and clipping a leash to the dog's neck, not because she thought he'd run, but because protocol demanded it. The dog didn't resist, though his body stayed taut, his eyes never leaving the ambulance's open doors. "Jake, grab the truck," Mia said, already moving toward her jeep. "I'll take him with me." Jake jogged to his pickup, calling over his shoulder, "Meet you at the hospital. Don't let that dog chew up your seats." His attempt at levity felt forced, but Mia appreciated it. She opened the jeep's passenger door and the dog hesitated, his nose twitching as he glanced at the ambulance. "It's okay," Mia said softly, patting the seat. "We're going to her. Come on." As if understanding, the dog leapt into the jeep with surprising agility, settling on the seat with his front paws braced, his gaze fixed on the ambulance as its sirens wailed to life. Mia slid into the driver's seat, her hands shaking slightly as she turned the key. The weight of the moment pressed against her chest, the girl's frail form, the dog's unwavering loyalty, the unanswered questions swirling in her mind. Who had left a child in that truck? And how had this dog, starving and alone, become her protector? The jeep roared to life, and Mia followed the ambulance, keeping pace as it sped through Cloverdale's quiet streets. The dog sat upright, his ears pricked, his body swaying slightly with the turns, but never relaxing. Mia stole glances at him, marveling at his focus. "You're something else," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "You stayed with her, didn't you, all this time?" The hospital was a 15-minute drive, but it felt like an eternity. Mia's mind raced, piecing together fragments of the scene they'd left behind. The truck abandoned in that desolate lot, the anonymous tip, vague but urgent. The dog, guarding not just a vehicle but a life. She'd seen dogs do extraordinary things, sniff out danger, comfort the grieving, but this felt like something more, something almost sacred. As they pulled into the hospital's emergency bay, the ambulance doors swung open, and the paramedics rushed the girl inside. Mia parked and grabbed the leash, but the dog was already moving, leaping from the jeep the moment she opened the door. He tugged toward the entrance, his whine turning into a soft, insistent bark. All right, Mia said, hurrying to keep up. "We're going." Inside, the hospital was a blur of white walls and antiseptic smells. Nurses bustled past, and a receptionist glanced up as Mia approached, the dog at her side. "Ma'am, no pets allowed," the woman started. But Mia cut her off, her voice firm but polite. "He's not a pet. He's with the girl they just brought in. She was found in a truck, and he was guarding her. He needs to stay close." Mia's words carried the weight of the truth, and the receptionist hesitated, then nodded, waving them toward the waiting area. Mia led the dog to a corner where he sat, his eyes fixed on the double doors leading to the emergency wing. She sank into a chair beside him, her hands still gripping the leash. The dog's presence was grounding, his quiet strength a reminder of why she did this work, even when it broke her heart. She reached down, scratching behind his ears, and he leaned into her hand, though his gaze never wavered. Jake arrived minutes later, his flannel shirt untucked, his cap in hand. "They're stabilizing her," he said, dropping into the chair beside Mia. "Docs say she's dehydrated, malnourished, but she's responding. They're running tests now." He glanced at the dog, who hadn't moved. "He's not letting her out of his sight, is he?" "Nope," Mia said, a small smile tugging at her lips. "He's her guardian angel." She paused, her fingers tracing the dog's matted fur. "I'm calling him Scout. Feels right." Jake nodded, a flicker of warmth in his tired eyes. "Scout, huh? Yeah, suits him." He leaned back, exhaling. "What do we do now?" "Kid's safe, but that truck, the tip, something's off, Mia." "I know," Mia said, her voice low. "Someone left her there, and Scout knew she needed help. We need to find out who and why." She looked down at Scout, whose ears flicked, at the sound of his new name. His loyalty had saved a life, but Mia couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The hospital waiting room hummed with quiet tension, the kind that settles in when answers are scarce and questions pile up like unopened mail. Mia sat with her elbows on her knees, her fingers absently stroking Scout's wiry fur. The dog hadn't moved from his vigil, his soulful eyes fixed on the double doors where the girl had disappeared with the paramedics. His matted coat was still flecked with burrs and his ribs pressed against his sides, but his posture was unwavering, a silent promise to stay until he knew she was safe. Mia's chest ached with admiration and a growing unease. Scout's devotion had saved a life, but the how and why of it gnawed at her. Jake slouched in the chair beside her, scrolling through his phone, his thumb pausing occasionally as he read updates from the sheriff's department. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed faintly, casting stark shadows on the linoleum floor. "Sheriff's got a deputy checking the truck now," Jake said, his voice low to avoid disturbing the other waiting families. "Registered to a guy named Carl Weaver, reported stolen 3 weeks ago. No record of a kid, though." Mia frowned, her hand stilling on Scout's back. 3 weeks, and she's been out there how long? The thought of the girl, small, frail, alone except for Scout, made her stomach twist. "What about the tip? Any trace on the call?" Jake shook his head, setting his phone down. "Burner phone, untraceable. Whoever called knew enough to get us there, but not enough to stick around, or didn't want to." He glanced at Scout, who let out a soft huff, as if sensing the conversation's weight. "That dog's the only witness we've got." Mia's gaze settled on Scout, his oversized ears twitching at the faintest sounds from the emergency wing. "He's more than a witness," she said quietly. "He's the reason she's alive." She leaned closer, her voice softening. "What happened out there, Scout? How'd you find her?" As if in response, Scout's tail gave a slow thump, and he nudged her hand with his cold nose. Mia smiled despite herself, but the questions kept circling. How had a starving stray ended up guarding a child in an abandoned truck? Was he hers, or had he found her by chance? And why hadn't anyone come looking for either of them? The double doors swung open, and a nurse in blue scrubs approached, her expression guarded but kind. Mia and Jake stood, Scout rising with them, his leash taut as he strained toward the nurse. "You're the ones who brought in the girl?" the nurse asked, glancing at Scout with a mix of curiosity and caution. "Yeah," Mia said, her heart picking up speed. "How is she?" "She's stable," the nurse said, tucking her clipboard under her arm. "Dehydrated, malnourished, but she's responding to fluids. She's awake now, asking for her dog." The nurse's eyes softened as they landed on Scout. "I'm guessing that's him?" Mia nodded, relief flooding her. "His name's Scout. Can we see her?" The nurse hesitated, then nodded. "Briefly, she's still weak and we're waiting on social services. Follow me, but keep the dog calm." Mia exchanged a glance with Jake, who gave her a quick nod. "I'll wait here." "Check. In with the sheriff. Go." Mia clipped Scout's leash tighter and followed the nurse through the doors, her boots echoing in the sterile hallway. Scout trotted beside her, his head high, his whines replaced by an eager pant. The girl's room was small, the lights dimmed, to ease her eyes. She lay in a hospital bed, an IV line taped to her thin arm, her stuffed bear tucked beside her. Her dark hair was brushed back, revealing a face still pale but less gaunt, her brown eyes wide and alert. When she saw Scout, her face lit up, a faint smile breaking through the exhaustion. "Puppy," she whispered, her voice hoarse but full of warmth. She reached out a trembling hand, and Scout surged forward, his tail wagging furiously. Mia loosened the leash, letting him nuzzle the girl's hand. He licked her fingers, his soft whines filling the room, and the girl giggled, the sound fragile but alive. Mia's throat tightened. "Hey, sweetheart," she said, stepping closer. "I'm Mia. This is Scout. I think you already know him. What's your name?" The girl's eyes flicked to Mia, hesitant but trusting. "Lily," she said softly, her fingers curling into Scout's fur. "He stayed with me, in the truck." Mia nodded, crouching beside the bed to meet Lily's gaze. "He's a good dog. Kept you safe, didn't he?" Lily nodded, her smile fading as she hugged her bear closer. Mia kept her voice, gentle, careful not to push. "Can you tell me what happened, how you ended up in the truck?" Lily's eyes dropped to Scout and she took a shaky breath. "Uncle Carl, he said we were going on a trip, said it'd be fun, but then the truck broke and he got mad. Said he'd be back, but he didn't come." Her voice wavered and Scout nudged her hand as if to steady her. "It got cold at night, but Puppy stayed. He slept next to me, kept me warm." Mia's heart sank. She exchanged a glance with the nurse, who was jotting notes, but listening closely. "How long were you there, Lily?" Mia asked. Lily shrugged, her small shoulders barely moving. A long time, days maybe. I had some chips, but they ran out. Her eyes filled with tears, but she clung to Scout, who rested his head on the bed, his presence a quiet anchor. Mia reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. You were so brave, Lily, and Scout was brave too. You're both safe now. She looked at Scout, who met her gaze with those deep, knowing eyes. He'd stayed with Lily through hunger, cold, and fear. A stray who'd chosen to be a hero. The nurse cleared her throat. Social services is on their way, and we've contacted her grandparents. They're local, said they've been looking for her. She paused, her eyes on Scout. That dog is something special. Yeah, Mia said, her voice thick. He is. She stood, giving Lily's hand a gentle squeeze. We'll be back, okay? Scout and I aren't going anywhere. As they left the room, Scout lingered, looking back at Lily until the door closed. Mia's mind churned with what Lily had said. Uncle Carl, a stolen truck, a promise broken. Scout had filled the gap, but the story was far from complete. Someone had known Lily was there, someone had called it in, and Scout, somehow, had been her guardian through it all. Mia led Scout back to the hospital waiting room, her boots echoing softly in the sterile hallway. The dog's leash hung loose in her hand, his steps purposeful but calm, as if he knew Lily was safe for now. His wiry frame still bore the marks of his ordeal, matted fur, protruding ribs, but there was a quiet strength in his gait, a resilience that made Mia's chest swell with pride. Scout wasn't just a stray who'd stumbled into a rescue. He was a hero, a guardian who'd held the line for a frightened child. But as they reached the waiting area, Mia couldn't shake the nagging questions. How had Scout found Lily? And what drove him to stay? Jake looked up from his phone as they approached, his cap now stuffed in his back pocket. How's she doing? He asked, his eyes flicking to Scout, who settled at Mia's feet, his soulful gaze drifting back toward the emergency wing. Her name's Lily, Mia said, sinking into a chair. She's awake, talking a little. Said her uncle left her in the truck, promised to come back but didn't. Scout stayed with her, kept her warm. She reached down, scratching behind Scout's ears, and he leaned into her hand, his tail thumping once. She's asking for him. Jake let out a low whistle, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. That's one hell of a dog. Sheriff still digging into the uncle, Carl Weaver. Guy's got a rap sheet, mostly petty stuff, but he's been off the grid since the truck was reported stolen. No sign of him yet. He paused, his brow furrowing. You think the dog was hers? Like, before all this? Mia shook her head, her fingers tracing the burrs in Scout's fur. Lily called him Puppy, not a name. I don't think he belonged to her. He's got no collar, no chip. We checked at the scene, but he chose her, Jake. He stayed when he could have run. Her voice softened, tinged with awe. I've never seen anything like it. Jake nodded, his gaze settling on Scout. Yeah, he's special. What's next? We taking him to the shelter? Mia hesitated, glancing at Scout, who seemed to sense the question. His ears twitched and he let out a soft huff, his eyes flicking to the double doors. Not yet, she said firmly. Lily's grandparents are coming, and she's bonded to him. I want him close until we know she's okay. Besides... She trailed off, her mind circling back to the anonymous tip. Something's off about this. Someone knew they were there. We need to keep Scout with us until we figure out what's going on. Jake didn't argue, just gave a curt nod. Fair enough. I'll call the shelter. Let them know we're tied. You want me to grab some food for him? He's got to be starving. Yeah, Mia said, pulling a bag of treats from her backpack. But go slow. He's been through hell. She tossed a treat to Scout, who sniffed it cautiously before gobbling it down, his tail wagging faintly. Mia smiled, but her thoughts were elsewhere. Scout's loyalty had saved Lily, but his restlessness, the way he kept glancing at the doors, suggested he wasn't done yet. Over the next few hours, Mia and Jake took turns waiting while the hospital buzzed with activity. Social services arrived, followed by Lily's grandparents, a quiet, grey-haired couple with worried eyes and soft voices. Mia met them briefly, explaining Scout's role, and the grandmother, Ellen, teared up, reaching down to pat Scout's head. He's a blessing, she whispered, her hand trembling. We didn't know where she was. Carl. He's troubled, but we never thought he'd leave her like that. Mia nodded, her throat tight. Scout kept her safe. She's asking for him. Maybe you can bring him to see her tomorrow. Ellen agreed, and Mia felt a flicker of relief. Lily had a family, a home to go to, but Scout's story was still unfolding. By evening, Mia took Scout to the shelter to clean him up. The Putnam County Animal Rescue was a modest brick building, its kennels filled with wagging tails and hopeful eyes. Mia led Scout to a quiet exam room where she bathed him gently, working out the burrs and dirt. He stood patiently, his eyes tracking her every move, and when she offered him a bowl of kibble, he ate slowly, as if savoring each bite. "You're gonna be okay, buddy," Mia said, wrapping him in a warm towel. He nudged her hand, his cold. Knows a small comfort. As she settled Scout into a soft bed in her office, word of his heroics began to spread. A local reporter called, having heard about the rescue from a hospital staffer, and soon the story was on Cloverdale's small news site, "Stray Dog Saves Girl Left in Abandoned Truck." Donations poured in, bags of dog food, toys, even a few adoption inquiries for Scout. Mia read the messages, her heart warming at the community's response, but she couldn't shake the feeling that Scout wasn't ready to settle. He paced her office, his ears pricked, his gaze darting to the window as if waiting for another call. The next morning, Mia brought Scout back to the hospital. Lily was stronger, sitting up in bed, her stuffed bear in her lap. When she saw Scout, her face lit up, and she clapped her hands, calling, "Puppy!" Scout bounded to her side, his tail wagging furiously as he licked her face. Ellen and her husband, Tom, watched with tears in their eyes, promising to bring Scout to visit as often as Lily needed. Mia smiled, but her mind was elsewhere. Scout's restlessness hadn't faded, and the mystery of the tip, the uncle, and Scout's origins lingered like a shadow. That afternoon, as Mia sat in her Jeep with Scout curled in the passenger seat, her phone buzzed. It was Jake, his voice urgent. "Mia, we got another tip. Same deal, dog guarding something out by the old Miller barn. You in?" Mia glanced at Scout, who lifted his head, his eyes bright and alert. Her pulse quickened. "Yeah," she said, starting the engine. "We're in." The Jeep's tires crunched over the gravel road as Mia sped toward the old Miller barn, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the Indiana fields. Scout sat upright in the passenger seat, his wiry frame taut, his soulful eyes scanning the horizon. The call from Jake had set Mia's nerves on edge. Another anonymous tip, another dog guarding something, too similar to Lily's case to be a coincidence. Scout's ears twitched with every bump in the road, as if he sensed the weight of what lay ahead. Mia's hands gripped the steering wheel, her mind racing. Was this connected to Lily and the truck? And how did Scout, a stray with no apparent past, seem to know more than she did? She pulled up to the barn, a weathered structure sagging under the weight of years. Its red paint faded to a ghostly pink. Weeds choked the surrounding field, and a rusted tractor sat abandoned nearby, half swallowed by tall grass. Jake's pickup was already parked, and he stood by the barn's open door, his flannel shirt streaked with dust. He waved Mia over, his expression grim. "You're not gonna like this," he said as she and Scout approached. "It's familiar." Mia's stomach tightened. She clipped Scout's leash, though he hardly needed it, his focus laser-sharp, as he trotted toward the barn. The air was thick with the scent of damp wood and hay, and a faint, unsettling stillness hung over the scene. Scout's nose twitched, and he let out a low huff, his tail stiff as he led the way inside. The barn's interior was dim, lit only by slivers of sunlight slipping through cracked boards. Dust motes danced in the air, and the floor was littered with broken tools and rotting hay bales. In the far corner, tucked behind a pile of splintered crates, was a plastic pet crate, its door ajar. Scout beelined for it, his ears pricked, his body tense. Mia followed, her heart pounding as she caught sight of movement inside. Two tiny puppies, no more than 6 weeks old, curled together in a nest of shredded newspaper. Their fur was matted, their eyes crusted, but they whimpered softly, alive. "Jake," Mia called, kneeling beside the crate. They're just babies. She reached in gently, lifting the first puppy, a black and tan bundle with a faint tremble. It nuzzled her hand, its warmth a small miracle. The second, a grey fluff with a white patch on its nose, let out a weak yip as Jake scooped it up, cradling it against his chest. Scout sat by the crate, his gaze steady but alert, as if ensuring the puppies were safe. Mia's throat tightened. "How long you think they've been here?" she asked, checking the crate for food or water. There was none, just a stale smell and a few scattered kibble crumbs. "Not long," Jake said, his voice low. "They're weak but not gone. Someone left them recently." He nodded toward the crate's base, where fresh paw prints marked the dusty floor, small, deliberate, like Scout's, but not his. Another dog was here, guarding, maybe, like Scout with Lily. Mia's pulse quickened. She set the puppy back, in the crate, wrapping both in a clean towel from her backpack. Scout sniffed the paw prints, his nose working overtime, then looked up at her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. "You know something, don't you?" she murmured, scratching his ears. He huffed, his tail giving a single wag. Jake stood, scanning the barn. "This isn't random, Mia. Same setup as the truck. Abandoned spot, anonymous tip, dog guarding something. We need to call it in. But first—" He trailed off, his eyes catching something in the shadows. He stepped forward, brushing aside a pile of hay, and pulled out a folded piece of paper, its edges yellowed but clean. "Check this out." Mia took the paper, her hands steady despite the unease creeping up her spine. It was a map, hand-drawn with jagged lines marking the barn's location with an X. Below it, in block letters, were coordinates, latitude and longitude, precise to the decimal. No signature, no explanation, just the map and a single word scribbled in the corner. "Next." "Next," Mia echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. She looked at Scout, who was staring at the map in her hands. His ears flicked forward. "Jake, this is a lead. Whoever left those puppies wanted us to find this." Jake's jaw tightened. "Or it's a trap. We don't know who's behind this, Mia. Could be the uncle, could be someone else. But they're playing a game, and Scout's caught in it." Mia folded the map, tucking it into her pocket. "Then we play smarter." She stood, lifting the crate with the puppies, who squirmed faintly against the towel. "Let's get these little ones to the shelter. Then we figure out what those coordinates mean. Scout's already one step ahead of us." They loaded the crate into Jake's truck, Scout hopping into Mia's Jeep without hesitation. As they drove back to the shelter, the puppy's soft whimpers filled the air, a reminder of the stakes. Mia glanced at Scout, his eyes fixed on the road ahead, his body poised as if ready for the next challenge. The community was already rallying around his story, donations, news articles, calls from people wanting to help. But Mia knew Scout wasn't just a feel-good headline. He was a guide, leading them into something bigger, something darker. At the shelter, Mia and Jake handed the puppies to the vet tech, who confirmed they were malnourished, but would recover with care. Mia settled Scout in her office with a bowl of food, but he barely ate, his gaze drifting to the window. She pulled out the map, spreading it on her desk. The coordinates pointed to a field 10 miles west, another forgotten corner of Putnam County. Her gut told her Scout would lead them there, just as he'd led them to Lily and now these puppies. As she traced the map's lines, her phone buzzed with a text from Ellen, Lily's grandmother. "Lily's asking for Scout. Can he visit tomorrow? She's drawing pictures of him." Mia smiled, her heart warming at the thought of Lily's recovery, but the map in front of her cast a shadow. Scout was saving lives, but each rescue pulled them deeper into a mystery that felt far from over. Mia's fingers traced the jagged lines of the hand-drawn map. The coordinates burned into her mind as she sat at her cluttered desk in the Putnam County Animal Rescue Office. The shelter was quiet now. The puppies from the Miller barn settled in the vet room, their soft whimpers replaced by the hum of a space heater. Scout lay curled in a dog bed by the window, his wiry frame finally still, but his ears twitched at every creak of the old building. The map's single word, "Next," echoed in Mia's head, a taunt or a promise she couldn't ignore. The field 10 miles west was their next stop, and she knew Scout would lead the way, just as he had with Lily. And the puppies. But the deeper they went, The more the pieces of this puzzle felt like a trap. The office door swung open, and Jake stepped in, a steaming coffee mug in one hand and a folder in the other. His flannel was rumpled, his eyes heavy with the weight of a long day. "Sheriff's report on the barn came back," he said, dropping the folder on the desk. "No prints on the crate, no DNA. Whoever left those puppies was careful. But they found tire tracks nearby, fresh from a van, not a truck. Doesn't match Carl Weaver's vehicle." Mia's brow furrowed as she opened the folder, scanning the grainy photos of the tire marks. "So it's not just Lily's uncle," she said, her voice low. "Someone else is involved, someone who knows how to cover their tracks." She glanced at Scout, who lifted his head, his soulful eyes meeting hers. "And they're using dogs to send a message." Jake leaned against the desk, sipping his coffee. "Yeah, but why? What's the end game? Leave kids and puppies in crates, drop cryptic maps and hope we follow. It's like they're testing us or him." He nodded toward Scout, who let out a soft huff as if agreeing. Mia's fingers tightened around the map. "Scout's the key. He's not just finding these animals, he's finding people. Lily, now these puppies, and I bet whatever's at those. Coordinates is another piece of the puzzle." She stood, pacing the small office, her boots scuffing the worn linoleum. "We need to check that field, Jake. Tonight." Jake raised an eyebrow, setting his mug down. "Tonight? Mia, it's pushing 9. We're both beat and Scout's barely eaten. Can't it wait till morning?" "No," Mia said, her voice firm but not sharp. "If there's another dog out there, another kid, we can't risk waiting. Scout's ready." She crouched beside him, scratching his ears. "Aren't you, buddy?" Scout's tail thumped once, and he stood, his body alert as if he'd been waiting for the call. Jake sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "All right, but we're calling the sheriff for backup. This is starting to feel bigger than us." He grabbed his phone, dialing the deputy on duty, while Mia packed her backpack, flashlights, water, treats, and a first aid kit. Scout watched her every move, his restlessness mirroring her own. An hour later, they were bouncing down a dirt road, the Jeep's headlights slicing through the dark. The field was a desolate stretch of Putnam County, bordered by gnarled oaks and dotted with old fence posts. The coordinates led to a clearing where the grass was trampled, as if someone had been there recently. Mia parked, and Scout leapt out before she could open the door, his nose to the ground, his tail stiff. Jake joined them, his flashlight beam sweeping the area. "Looks like a drop site," he said, pointing to a patch of flattened earth. "No tire tracks, though. They're getting sloppier, or bolder." Scout let out a low bark and trotted toward a cluster of bushes at the clearing's edge. Mia followed, her pulse quickening as she spotted a familiar shape, a plastic pet crate half hidden by branches. Scout sat beside it, his eyes fixed on the crate's door. Mia knelt, her flashlight revealing a single occupant, a dog, a skinny beagle mix with drooping ears and a trembling frame. Its eyes were wide, but it didn't cower, instead nudging the crate door as if asking to be let out. "Hey, sweetheart," Mia said softly, opening the crate. The dog crawled forward, sniffing her hand before licking it. She checked for injuries. None, just hunger and dehydration. Jake handed her a water bowl, and the dog drank greedily, its tail wagging faintly. Scout watched, his posture relaxed, but vigilant, as if ensuring the rescue went smoothly. "Another one," Jake said, his voice tight. "Same setup, same condition. This isn't random, Mia." He scanned the bushes, his flashlight catching something glinting in the dirt. He bent down, pulling out a small metal tag, the kind used for dog collars. Etched on it was a single word: follow. Mia's breath caught. She took the tag, turning it over in her hand. No other markings, no clues, just that word, echoing the A. "Maps next." "They're leading us somewhere," she said, her voice steady despite the chill creeping up her spine. "This is a trail, Jake, and Scout's the one they want to follow it." Scout let out a soft whine, his nose nudging the crate. Mia followed his gaze and noticed something tucked beneath the newspaper lining, a torn page from a journal, its edges frayed but the handwriting clear. She pulled it out, her flashlight illuminating the words, "The strong survive. The loyal lead. Find the next before it's too late." Below it was another set of coordinates, this time pointing to a quarry on the county's edge. Jake read over. her shoulder, his jaw clenching. "This is a game to someone, Mia. They're using dogs, maybe kids, to pull us in. We need to be careful." Mia nodded, folding the page and slipping it into her pocket. "We will be, but we're not stopping." She looked at Scout, who stood ready, his eyes bright in the dark. "He's not stopping." They loaded the Beagle mix into the Jeep, Scout hopping in beside it, his presence calming the trembling dog. As they drove back to the shelter, Mia's mind churned. The journal page, the tags, the coordinates, it was a pattern, deliberate and chilling. Someone was orchestrating this, and Scout was at the heart of it, a stray-turned beacon, leading them deeper into a mystery that felt both personal and vast. The shelter's fluorescent lights buzzed softly as Mia sat cross-legged on the floor of her office. Scout sprawled beside her, his head resting on her knee. The Beagle mix from the field, now named Daisy by the vet tech, slept in a crate nearby, her soft snores a small comfort after the night's tension. The journal page and metal tag lay on the desk, their cryptic messages. The strong survive. The loyal lead, follow, weighing heavily on Mia's mind. Scout's soulful eyes flicked to the desk, as if he too felt the pull of the coordinates pointing to the quarry. The mystery was deepening, but so was the bond between Mia and Scout, a partnership forged in trust and shared purpose. Mia ran her fingers through Scout's wiry fur, working out a stubborn burr. "You're leading us somewhere, aren't you?" she murmured. Scout's tail thumped once, and he nudged her hand, his cold nose a quiet reassurance. In the days since finding Lily, Mia had seen Scout transform from a wary stray into a guide, his instincts sharper than any map. He'd saved Lily, led them to the puppies, and now Daisy, each rescue a step deeper into a puzzle that felt both dangerous and deliberate. But it was Scout's unwavering loyalty, his quiet determination that anchored Mia, giving her the courage to keep going. Jake poked his head through the door, a thermos of coffee in hand. "Sheriff's sending a deputy to check the quarry at first light," he said, leaning against the frame. "They're taking this seriously now. Tire tracks, crates, notes. They think it's organized, maybe tied to animal trafficking or worse." His eyes flicked to Scout, softening. "He's the star of the show, though. Local news wants an interview. Hero dog saves again." Mia snorted, but a smile tugged at her lips. "He's not in it for the fame." She scratched Scout's ears and he sighed, his body relaxing against her. "But it's good the community's behind us. We'll need the support if this gets bigger." Jake nodded, setting the thermos on the desk. "It's already bigger. Those coordinates, the journal page, they're not just breadcrumbs. Someone's watching, Mia. They know we're following Scout." He paused, his voice lowering. "You sure you're ready for where this leads?" Mia met his gaze, her resolve steady. "Scout's ready. That's enough for me." She stood, brushing fur from her jeans, and grabbed her backpack. "Let's get some rest. We hit the quarry at dawn." Sleep came fitfully, Mia's dreams filled with rusted trucks and cryptic notes. When her alarm buzzed at 5 a.m., she found Scout already by the door, his tail wagging faintly as if he'd been waiting for her. She fed him a hearty breakfast, noting how his ribs were less prominent after days of proper meals. "You're getting stronger, buddy," she said, clipping his leash. He licked her hand, his eyes bright with purpose. The quarry was a stark, rocky expanse on the edge of Putnam County, its cliffs casting jagged shadows in the early light. Mia and Jake parked near a gravel path, joined by Deputy Ramirez, a no-nonsense woman with a soft spot for dogs. Scout leapt from the jeep, his nose to the ground, leading them toward a cluster of boulders near the quarry's base. Mia's heart raced as she spotted fresh paw prints in the dust, small like Daisy's but not Scout's. "Another dog was here," she said, her voice tight. Scout let out a sharp bark and darted behind a boulder where a crate sat, partially covered by a tarp. Mia lifted the tarp, revealing a young border collie, its black and white fur matted but its eyes alert. It wagged its tail as Mia opened the crate, bounding out to sniff Scout, who stood watch like a proud mentor. Inside the crate, tucked beneath a blanket, was another note. "He finds what matters. Keep going." Below it, new coordinates pointed to a shuttered warehouse 20 miles east. Ramirez took photos, her expression grim. "This is no coincidence. Someone's staging these, using dogs to draw you in." She glanced at Scout, who sat by the collie, his gaze steady. He's good, but he's making you a target. Mia nodded, her hand resting on Scout's head. I know, but he's not just finding dogs, he's finding hope. We can't stop now. She looked at the collie who leaned against Scout, mirroring his calm. The bond between them was instant, a silent pact that echoed Scout's connection with Lily and now Mia. Back at the shelter, the collie, named Finn, was checked by the vet and settled with Daisy. Scout paced the office, his restlessness growing with each new clue. Mia spread the notes and maps on her desk, connecting the dots. The truck, the barn, the field, the quarry. Each site was isolated, each rescue tied to Scout's instincts. The journal's words, the loyal lead, felt personal, as if someone knew Scout's heart, his drive to protect. That afternoon, Mia took Scout to visit Lily, whose smile lit up the hospital room. She hugged Scout, her drawings of him taped to the wall. He's my hero, she whispered, and Scout licked her face, his tail wagging furiously. Mia's heart warmed, but the new coordinates loomed, a reminder that Scout's mission wasn't over. As they left the hospital, Jake called with news. The warehouse had been flagged for trespassing reports, and a witness claimed to have seen a man with a van unloading crates. Mia looked at Scout, who stared out the Jeep's window, ready for the next step. Their bond had grown unbreakable, a partnership that turned fear into courage, mystery into purpose. The pre-dawn air was cool and heavy as Mia steered the Jeep toward the shuttered warehouse, the coordinates from the quarry crate etched in her mind. Scout sat in the passenger seat, his wiry frame alert, his soulful eyes fixed on the dark road ahead. The bond between them had solidified through each rescue. Lily, the puppies, Daisy, Finn, and now as they neared the warehouse, Mia felt it like a pulse. Scout wasn't just her partner, he was her guide, leading her into the heart of a mystery that had grown too big to ignore. The notes, the crates, the paw prints, they all pointed to this moment, and Mia's gut told her they were walking into something final. Jake followed in his pickup, his headlights a steady presence in the rearview mirror. Deputy Ramirez had promised backup, but the sheriff's office was stretched thin, so it was just the three of them for now. Mia's hands tightened on the wheel as the warehouse loomed into view, a hulking, corrugated metal structure on the edge of Putnam County, its windows boarded, its chain-link fence sagging under years of neglect. The witness's report, a man with a van unloading crates, echoed in her mind, and the journal's words, the loyal lead, felt like a warning. She parked 100 yards out, cutting the engine. Scout leapt from the Jeep, his nose already working the ground, his tail stiff. Jake joined them, his flashlight beam slicing through the pre-dawn gloom. Place looks deserted, he said, his voice low, but I don't trust it. You sure? About this, Mia? Mia clipped Scout's leash, though his focus was unwavering. Scout's sure, she said, her voice steady despite the knot in her stomach. He's been leading us here from the start. Scout let out a soft huff, his ears pricked as he tugged toward the warehouse. Mia exchanged a glance with Jake, who nodded, his hand resting on the radio at his belt. They approached the fence, finding a gap where the chain link had been cut. Scout slipped through first, his movements silent and purposeful, and Mia and Jake followed, crouching low. The warehouse's side door was ajar, a sliver of darkness spilling out. Scout paused, sniffing the air, then let out a low growl, his first sign of unease. Mia's pulse quickened. Easy, buddy, she whispered, her hand on his scruff. We're with you. Inside the warehouse was a cavern of shadows, the air thick with the smell of oil and rust. Crates lined the walls, some empty, others stacked haphazardly, their doors rusted shut. Mia's flashlight caught glints of metal, leashes, bowls, tags, scattered across the concrete floor. Scout moved forward, his nose guiding them past rows of crates until he stopped at a clearing in the center. There, illuminated by a single, flickering bulb, stood a woman. She was in her 40s, her hair pulled back under a hooded jacket, her eyes sharp and unyielding. A leash dangled from her hand, but no dog was attached. Scout growled again, his body tense, and Mia tightened her grip on the leash. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice echoing in the vast space. The woman smiled, a thin, calculated curve of her lips. "You're persistent," she said, her voice calm, almost admiring. "I knew he'd bring you here." She nodded toward Scout, who bared his teeth, his hackles raised. "He's remarkable, isn't he? Always finds what matters." Jake stepped forward, his flashlight trained on the woman. "What's this about? The crates, the notes, the dogs, what do you want?" The woman's smile didn't waver. "I'm Claire," she said, ignoring Jake's question. "I've been testing them. Dogs, people. The strong survive, the loyal lead. Scout's the best I've seen. He found the girl, the puppies, the others. He led you right to me." Mia's blood ran cold. "You left Lily in that truck," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "You left puppies to starve, dogs to suffer. For what, some sick game?" Claire tilted her head unfazed. "Not a game, a proof. The world's cruel, Mia. I wanted to see who could endure it, who'd fight to protect, to survive. Scout did. He chose Lily, chose the others. He's my success." Scout lunged, his bark sharp, but Mia held him back, her heart pounding. "You're twisted," she said, her voice low. "You used him, used them all. It ends now." Claire's eyes flicked to the shadows, and Mia caught a faint sound. Footsteps, then the creak of a crate. "It's not over," Claire said, stepping back. "There's one more test." She raised her hand, and a crate door swung open, revealing a trembling teenage boy, his wrists bound, his eyes wide with fear. A dog, a scruffy terrier, stood beside him, growling protectively. Jake radioed for backup, his voice urgent, as Mia moved toward the boy, Scout at her side. "Stay where you are," she told Claire, her tone hard. But Claire didn't run. She watched, her expression almost proud, as Mia untied the boy and calmed the terrier. Scout stood guard, his growls keeping Claire at bay, until Ramirez and two deputies burst through the door, cuffing Claire without resistance. "You'll find more," Claire said as they led her away, her voice eerily calm. "Scout will. He always does." The deputies secured the boy and the terrier, promising to get them to safety, but Claire's words lingered, a chilling hint that her network extended beyond this warehouse. Mia knelt beside Scout, her hands shaking as she hugged him. "You did it, buddy," she whispered, her voice thick. He licked her face, his tail wagging faintly, but his eyes scanned the warehouse as if sensing another crate, another soul, another life to be saved. The boy, his name was Ethan, clutched her arm, his voice breaking. "I was so scared. But he stayed with me. He didn't leave." Mia's heart ached. She looked at Scout, his steady presence a reminder of why they'd come this far. "You're safe now," she told Ethan, her voice gentle. "We've got you." The warehouse's heavy silence lingered as the deputies led Claire away, her cryptic warning, "You'll find more," echoing in Mia's mind. Scout stood firm beside her, his wiry frame a quiet pillar of strength, his soulful eyes scanning the shadows as if ready for the next challenge. The teenage boy Ethan clung to the scruffy terrier, his tear-streaked face pale but relieved. Mia's heart pounded, a mix of adrenaline and awe at Scout's unwavering courage. He'd led them to Ethan, just as he had to Lily, the puppies. Daisy and Finn, each rescue a testament to his loyalty. But now, as the deputies secured the scene and animal control arrived for the remaining crates, Mia felt the weight of closure and the promise of healing. She knelt beside Ethan, her voice gentle. "You're safe now, Ethan. We're going to get you home." The terrier, whom Ethan called Rusty, nuzzled his hand, and Scout sat close, his presence calming both boy and dog. Ethan nodded, his voice shaky. "He stayed with me, in the dark. I thought no one would find us." Mia's throat tightened. She glanced at Scout, who met her gaze with a steady warmth. "Scout found you," she said softly. "He always does." She helped Ethan to his feet, guiding him and Rusty toward the ambulance waiting outside. The deputies had found Ethan's parents' contact information, and a reunion was already in motion. But Mia knew the scars of his ordeal would linger, just as Lily's had. Back at the warehouse, Jake catalogued the crates with animal control, his flashlight revealing a grim tally. 10 dogs, most malnourished but alive, each with a tag bearing a single word: survive, lead, endure. The pattern was chilling, a twisted philosophy Claire had imposed on her victims. Mia joined him, Scout, at her side, and they worked in quiet tandem, ensuring each dog was loaded into rescue vans bound for the shelter. Scout sniffed each crate, his tail wagging faintly as if acknowledging every survivor. By sunrise, the warehouse was cleared, and Mia drove Scout back to the Putnam County Animal Rescue, exhaustion tugging at her bones, but her heart full. The shelter buzzed with volunteers, spurred by Scout's growing fame. Donations of food, blankets, and toys piled up, and the news vans parked outside clamored for updates on the hero dog. Mia ignored them, focusing on Scout, who curled up in her office, finally eating a full bowl of kibble. She sat beside him, her hand resting on his back. "You did good, buddy," she whispered. He licked her wrist, his eyes soft but still alert, as if he knew their work wasn't truly done. Over the next few days, the shelter became a hub of healing. Daisy, Finn, Rusty, and the warehouse dogs were vetted, fed, and placed in foster homes, their resilience a mirror of Scout's. Ethan's parents visited, tearfully thanking Mia and Scout, and Ethan insisted on seeing Rusty daily, his bond with the terrier unbreakable. Mia arranged for Rusty to stay with a foster near Ethan's home, knowing the dog was his anchor, just as Scout had been Lily's. Lily's recovery brought the brightest moments. Mia took Scout to visit her at her grandparents' cozy farmhouse, where wildflowers bordered the porch and a tire swing hung from an oak. Lily, now stronger, ran to Scout, her laughter ringing as she hugged him, her stuffed bear tucked under one arm. "Scout's my best friend," she said, her eyes shining. Ellen and Tom, her grandparents, watched with gratitude, their faces etched with relief. "We want him to stay," Ellen said, her voice firm. "Lily needs him, and he belongs with her." Mia's heart swelled, but a pang of bittersweet loss flickered. Scout had become her partner, her guide through the darkness, but she saw the way he leaned into Lily's touch, his tail wagging furiously. "He's yours," Mia said, smiling through the ache, "but I'll visit, okay? He's family now." The paperwork was simple, and Scout officially became Lily's, though he spent his days between the farmhouse and the shelter, where Mia ensured he had a bed in her office. The community rallied, hosting a fundraiser to rebuild the shelter's kennels inspired by Scout's story. Volunteers painted murals of him, and Lily's drawings of her hero dog adorned the walls, a testament to the hope he'd sparked. But late one night, as Mia locked up the shelter, she found a small crate on the doorstep, empty except for a note. "He led you home." No coordinates, no tags, just those words, written in the same block letters as the others. Mia's breath caught. She looked at Scout, who sniffed the crate and sat, his eyes fixed on the dark fields beyond. Claire was in custody, but her warning, "You'll find more," suggested a network, a shadow still out there. Mia tucked the note into her pocket, her resolve hardening. Scout had brought them this far, saving lives and mending hearts. Whatever lay ahead, they'd face it together, his loyalty a beacon in the unknown. The late summer sun bathed Lily's grandparents' farmhouse in a golden glow, casting long shadows across the wildflower-lined porch. Mia parked her Jeep in the gravel drive, her heart lifting at the sight of Lily swinging on the tire swing, her laughter echoing through the Indiana air. Scout bounded from the passenger seat, his wiry coat now sleek from regular meals, his soulful eyes bright with joy as he raced to Lily's side. The girl dropped from the swing, her arms wrapping around him in a hug that spoke of a bond forged in survival. Mia smiled, the warmth of the moment easing the lingering weight of the warehouse confrontation, and the cryptic note, "He led you home," still tucked in her pocket. Ellen stepped onto the porch, a tray of lemonade in her hands, her grey hair catching the light. "Mia, you're just in time," she called, her voice warm. "Lily's been planning this all week." Tom followed, carrying a plate of cookies, his quiet smile mirroring his wife's. The farmhouse had become a haven for Lily, a place of healing after the terror of the abandoned truck, and Scout was, its heart, his presence a constant comfort. Mia joined them, settling into a wicker chair as Lily and Scout played in the yard. Scout chased a tennis ball, his tail wagging furiously, while Lily clapped, her drawings of him pinned to a makeshift art wall on the porch. "He's so happy," Lily said, running to Mia with a grin. "He loves it here, but he misses you too." She handed Mia a drawing, a crayon sketch of Scout with a cape standing beside a smiling Lily and Mia. Mia's throat tightened. "I miss him too," she said, ruffling Lily's hair, "but he's right where he belongs." She glanced at Scout, who paused his game to meet her gaze, his tail giving a single thump. Their partnership had carried them through danger. Lily, Ethan, the dogs in the crates. But seeing him with Lily, carefree and loved, was the truest reward. He'd saved lives, but he'd also found a home. Ellen poured lemonade, her eyes soft, as she watched Lily. "The community's still talking about him," she said. "The shelter fundraiser broke records. They're naming a new wing after Scout." She reached down, patting Scout as he trotted over, his nose nudging her hand. "You've changed this town, Mia, you and him." Mia smiled, sipping her drink. "He did the heavy lifting, I just followed." The Putnam County Animal Rescue had transformed in the weeks since Claire's arrest. Volunteers painted kennels, local businesses donated supplies, and families adopted Daisy, Finn, Rusty, and the warehouse dogs, inspired by Scout's story. The murals of him, heroic, steadfast, graced the shelter walls, and Lily's drawings hung in Mia's office, a daily reminder of why she kept going. But the note from the shelter doorstep haunted her. "He led you home." Claire was behind bars. Her twisted tests exposed, but her warning, "You'll find more," suggested a network, a shadow Mia couldn't yet see. She hadn't told Ellen or Tom, not wanting to dim their joy, but she'd shared it with Jake and Deputy Ramirez, who were quietly investigating. The crate had no prints, no clues, just those words, a whisper of something unfinished. As the sun dipped lower, Lily tugged Mia's hand. "Come see Scout's bed," she said, leading her inside. The living room was cozy, with a quilt-draped couch and a dog bed piled with blankets, Scout's favorite tennis ball tucked in the corner. "He sleeps by my bed every night," Lily said proudly. "He keeps the bad dreams away." Mia knelt, hugging Lily tightly. "He's good at that," she said, her voice thick. Scout joined them, his cold nose pressing against Mia's cheek, and she laughed, the sound mingling with Lily's giggles. For a moment the weight of the mystery lifted, replaced by the simple joy of this family Scout had helped rebuild. Back on the porch, Tom lit a citronella candle as dusk settled, the air alive with crickets. "You'll come back, won't you?" he asked Mia, his voice gentle. "Lily's counting on it, so's Scout." "Always," Mia promised, her heart full. She stood, brushing fur from her jeans, and gave Scout a final scratch. "Take care of her, buddy." He wagged his tail, his eyes warm as if to say, "I will." Driving back to the shelter, Mia felt a quiet peace. Scout's heroics had rippled through Cloverdale, mending hearts and sparking hope. But as she pulled into the shelter lot, her headlights caught something glinting by the door. A small metal tag, identical to the ones from the crates. Her pulse quickened. She parked and approached, picking it up. Etched on it was a single word, "Begin." Tucked beneath was a new map, its coordinates pointing to a rural road 50 miles north. Mia's breath caught. She looked out at the dark fields, imagining Scout's steady gaze. The game wasn't over, but neither was their fight. She slipped the tag and map into her pocket, her resolve reigniting. Scout had led her home, to Lily, to the shelter, to herself, and he'd lead her forward too, wherever the next crate waited.